I'm Madeline, and I'm an icon. Impactful, compassionate, original, nurturing. So I was born in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. Although I was near a major city, there's still some small town ways of life that happen. I went to a Catholic school, not a lot of people in that school, right? I think I had like 13 people in my 8th grade class. But then I went to public school for high school, and that was awesome because I realized that I was 1 out of 13, and it was easy to pick on me because I was like the limpy gazelle. But when I went to high school, I was 1 of 400 and some. So it was very easy to kind of blend in. But I didn't, because that's not me, to blend in. I wanted to be involved in the color guard, and I wanted to be involved in the school newspaper, and I wanted to do all that. And those were the moments, I think, for high school that, because being in elementary school was so tough because I was 1 of 13, I tried to blend in all the time. Being in high school, I tried to stand out. I tried to be like, no one's going to mess with me. No one can. Everybody was just worried about going to college and getting married, and I was only worried about getting to college and having a career. And to them, that seemed so weird. That seemed like, why? Why do you want to do that? And it was even worse because I wanted to do political science. And to them, they were like, but that's not, like, you don't want to do something cool? Like, it's political science. And to me, I'm like, no, I'm so interested in this. I want to do it. And then I ended up going to a community college, which then everybody around me was like, but you're so smart. Why are you just going to Monco? Like, that just doesn't make sense. But it was financially great sense because I didn't have to pay as much. And then I could go on to another school. And so when I finally did go to the 4-year, I had my 2 years at community college and then went into American University in DC. And that fit perfectly for me because for now I was around a bunch of people that thought like me, that didn't, not like me, but they accepted that like everybody was different. And I didn't have to hide any piece. I could still like be just Maddie at times, but I could also be somebody who was trying to gain, and be powerful. I switched from poli-sci to business, and I was like all dead on for going into work in marketing and something like that. I graduated, it was 2009, so it was not the best economy. And I was very obsessed with QVC because I grew up 30 minutes from my mom was a jewelry packer. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to go work for QVC. I understand that. That was the first telephone number I knew. I can do this. But then going to QVC, nobody really even had an idea what American University was because they were like, oh, that's a school in DC, whatever. And so I really struggled trying to fit in at QVC because I still wasn't fitting the mold of like the typical college graduate. And I had this DC experience, and that was just like very weird. Even though one of the host's sons had went to the same university, it was still like thrown off. And I had known that I was feeling that way because that night that I came home from graduating from AU, I turned to my mom and I said, I don't think I belong here anymore. Now my mother holds that against me like for the rest of my life, but I could feel it then that it didn't feel the same. And even through QVC, I finally was like, you know what, I need to go back to DC. I need to be where I felt normal, like I felt like I was okay. And I did. And I went to work for Georgetown University. I got my master's in technology management, which no way did I ever think I was going to be in tech at all. I went from tech into to working for a company, a partner to Microsoft. And I remember saying, even when I was looking for that job, I was like, well, maybe someday I'll work for Microsoft. And my professor at the time was like, okay. I'm like, but they're not going to hire me because I'm not like techie. I'm a relationship person. I can do that. And they're like, why do you think that? I'm like, because they're Microsoft, clearly. He's like, no, you just need to keep you can get I did end up working for Microsoft. And I did relationship management, and I loved it. But then when I thought the world was awesome and everything was doing great, I got laid off from Microsoft during the big tech layoffs of everything. And then a month later, I had my first miscarriage. Now, I had had a son earlier in that, which is a whole nother piece of that. But I was just broken because I thought, oh my God, I don't know if I can survive this. I don't know if I can come back from it. But I did. I ended up having my second child, Max, who has its own, like even I thought I was going to have a normal pregnancy with him, but of course, nothing goes that way. And shortly after, and just a couple months ago, came back to Microsoft. So not only did I think that, oh no, Microsoft will never hire me. No, they've hired me twice now. So I apparently am going the right way. I feel like I am finally just running at the speed that I can. And I'm not trying to keep up with anybody else in the race. I'm happy with where I am and what I'm doing. And that is exactly what makes life worth living every day. I mean, there's still moments, don't get me wrong. There's moments I wake up and I'm like, I don't have it today. I don't think I can do it. Somewhere I find that strength, whether it's in being a mom or it's trying to talk loud to some state government. It's still like, I got this. I can do it. I know I can make it through it. Just give me my Android, give me my coffee, and I'm good to go. So when I came back to DC and I was having my job at Georgetown, living in an apartment, and one day I was going to the metro and I met some guy who wanted to talk to me, which on the metro is like so weird because nobody talks on the DC metro. But he tried his darndest and we started talking and we realized we were from the same part of Pennsylvania. And we were actually not even just, like 2 weeks later after that, we figured out that the apartment that he grew up in was the same apartment that my grandparents had lived in 50 years prior. Like the same apartment. So some people call that fate. I called it creepy because I was 26 and was like, dude, what is this? But we had our first date on May 3rd of 2014. And then 5 years later, on May 3rd, 2019, we got married. And we got married at Elmwood Park Zoo in Pennsylvania. So we actually had we got married in front of the Eagles because he's a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. And the official Philadelphia Eagles lives there. They squawked during our vows. Our first act as husband and wife was to go feed giraffes. One spit on my gown. At that point, I didn't really care because I was like, whatever, it's done. And we had a really fun party. We had like a carousel, and we had funnel cake, and it was a great, great event. And that led to us having our first child in 2021. When I was born, everything was fine until like a nurse was listening to the heart and thought something sounded like off. And probably most nurses would just like, oh, it's fine. She did not. She kept trying to listen a little harder. And they sent me from the hospital I was at to another hospital, to eventually Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. And they realized that I had a heart issue. I have the aortic stenosis, and I had my aortic valve, instead of having 3 working flaps, there was 2 that worked and 1 that didn't. And so they did a little procedure on me to try to make it a little bigger, but they did realize that at some point I was going to have open heart surgery. So at 2 years old, it was like the same, like a couple weeks after my 2nd birthday, I had open heart surgery at Children's, which my parents describe as the hardest thing they'd ever went through. I am the youngest of 4. And there's a big gap between me and the 3rd one. So there's like 14 years between me and my sister, and 20 between me and the first one. So my parents were not expecting that at all. They already were like, oh my God, we're so old. But it wasn't anything to do with that. It was just, this is actually very common for children. It's 1 in 110 babies will be born with CHD, or congenital heart disease. I had a successful surgery. Everything has been working wonderfully. Had no problems whatsoever. I've never had to really focus on it. I mean, there's certainly like okay, let's not overwork yourself. But I just was never into sports anyway, so it wasn't killing me on that. We had our first son, Alexander. And we were over the moon because we just were so excited. I was like, I wanted the girl, but then when I found out it was a boy, I'm like, no, this is going to be awesome. This is wonderful. And we had our 20-week appointment. And they're testing everything and making everything. They go 5 fingers, 5 toes. Oh, it's perfect. And they kept making me get up like to walk around. They're like, oh, he needs to move. So I would get up and they'd try to look again. And then eventually they realized what the nurse had saw and had brought in the doctor, and they kept getting me to get up because they wanted to get the best view, is that the blood flow in his heart was off. The arteries, the transposition of the great arteries is what he ended up having, which was another form of CHD. Not necessarily related to mine, but it's probably genetics because it all can be. And so when they told us that, I just remember just going into that one room and just breaking down because I thought my worst nightmare is happening. That I thought, oh my God, I did this to him because I have CHD. So I had to be the one. It's not James that has it. I have it. I must have done this to him. I had to have done something wrong. And I thought everything, I didn't know what to expect. We went to Children's National at that point, and they verified it. And it was the hardest thing when that doctor walked in, because she's like, he has transposition of the great arteries, but it's fixable. And we thought, okay. And they're like, no, we can fix this. This is not the worst thing to have. It's not great, but it's not the worst. And so then we just planned that I was going to be induced and everything would be, fine when he was born. I was induced. I had him. I was prepped the whole time that my doctors told me that, like, oh, well, you can't hold him because he's going to be blue and we're going to need to work right away to get him over to Children's. And I had told my doctor that, and she was like, and she knew I was full of anxiety, but she eventually was like, I'm just going to let her hold him. So I got like 10 seconds with him when he was first born. And then he went over to Children's, and then 3 days later, he had open heart surgery. Now, those first couple of weeks were incredibly hard. We lived in Children's National for 2 weeks. I was suffering from just having a baby and also mastitis and trying to figure out like you're sleeping on whatever their little version of a bed is, but it was terrifying. And there was a night where he kicked out one of his tubes. And so then they had to like rush in a bunch of doctors to try to fix it. And then they gave him medicine and it caused his heart rate to go up way too fast than it should have been. And it was like a journey, that whole 2 weeks of like going up and then coming back down, going back up and down. But we finally got to bring him home, and he has been special ever since. I mean, he's incredibly smart. He is obsessed with Spider-Man. You don't look at him and think that he has a heart issue. In all honesty, you don't look at me and see that I have a heart issue. It's just by the scars that are on our chest. And every day, I just am so thankful for those doctors at Children's National, for the doctor who even paid so close attention, because I know what it's like to be a person who has CHD, and now I know what it's like to be a mother and get that news and then have to sign the piece of paper and hand them over to a doctor to go cut their body open, and the fear that lives in that. But every day I look at him and he is full of life and so excited about everything, and I wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, nobody wants that for their child, but he gets to stand out there, and together we work with the Children's Heart Foundation, and we do walks and we raise awareness so that people know that it's so common and that it doesn't mean that your life's over either. And I especially find it important because I have been at one of the walks that I was at. There was another little girl. Her name was Madeline as well. And she had had a couple heart surgeries. I think she was about 15. And she said to me, so you have a heart issue and you had a baby? And I'm like, yeah, I did. I'm like, they take a lot more pictures, and I had talked it over with doctors and everything was fine. And she's like, well, I hope I get to have a baby someday. And now that I kind of see that you can, maybe I'll be able to have one. I'm like, maybe you will. And I think in that moment, it was for me realizing that my story about Alex was one story, but then also there were people that were looking at me as a woman who has been through these things. And her parents even said, she's like, thank you so much for talking to our daughter. And I'm like, listen, I'll tell anybody the story, because they need to know that it doesn't just, your life doesn't stop. Even as a parent, it doesn't stop just because you got a diagnosis. It means you can keep going. And yeah, maybe there's some limitations here and there, but it doesn't mean that everything is horrible and awful and that you can survive it. And so I see that every time I go through things, and I see it with Alex. And that's why I just keep wanting people to know that sometimes you get bad news, and sometimes it's things that you think can break you. And you do fall apart. But that doesn't mean you'll fall apart forever. And then I had Max. And Max came after my miscarriage, so he is in a roundabout way my rainbow baby. And unlike Alex, he was always a little bit bigger. He was always in the 80th percentile. He took every bit of energy from me when I was pregnant. Like, I gained really no weight and so much where the doctor was like, are you healthy? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, he's great. So as long as he's looking great, you're fine. So then we had Max. He was born on the day of the eclipse. So that was really exciting, except that he decided to make his entrance a different way. I was going to be induced again because having CHD, they would prefer to have a little bit more of a, timeline on it, and that they had the right doctors there if anything were to go wrong. And so they had induced, I did the balloon thing that they do, and I had just got done calling, like my water broke on its own. It was great. Call my mom and my sister, and I'm like laughing at them because this is absolutely hilarious, everything that's going on. And then I'm like, yeah, let's do a check, cervix check. Let's try that. Because I'm competitive at the end of the day. And so I wanted to know that I'm like, am I progressing the way I want to? And I was. It's just that Max's cord decided to come down before he did, which then made that an emergency situation. And they quickly took me into the operating room. I didn't have any epidural, so they had to put me out. And they had to do the C-section with him. And unfortunately, because my body was already ready to give birth to him, everything was all ready, they accidentally made a cut into his head, which was fine. It's hidden in his literally mop of hair now. But it was terrifying because my husband tells that story in a sense of my wife and my child are going in there, and the doctor comes in, tells me what's happening, and says something like 80% of the time, everything's fine. And then there's some cases where one or both don't come back. So my husband's sitting in the other room, terrified out of his mind, especially everything we've been through with Alex. And he's like, oh my God, what if I don't get them both back? And everything worked out fine. I did have some more bleeding, and they were able to fix it, but it was fine. And Max came out, and you can see him now, and he is full of life and joy, and he is just trying to sing every high note in Wicked that he can, and it's the cutest thing. And they are my every reason for doing anything, because they're my boys, and I can't imagine the world without either one of them. And I look at those faces, and first of all, I see my eyes, because they got the big Tom Chick blue eyes, and my whole that's all I ever need to see. I mean, as much as I can accomplish everything in my career, or I can gain a pageant crown or do any of that, it's the whole reason that I am who I am now is to be their mom and to show them what strength and power and resilience can look like. Because not every day works out perfectly, and we tell them that. Especially when, for my son, he was really upset when the Eagles lost that game and they didn't get to go to the Super Bowl again. That was one of those conversations. I was like, okay, babe, it's okay. It's okay. This is the life of being a Philly fan, honey. But I have to teach them every day that they can keep going. I think, honestly, it's the resiliency. You can't let the world bring you down. And I hope that from both of their experiences, and Alex seeing what he sees every day, and Max watching it through us, and really even through Alex too, they'll get there. And they're probably going to be just as strong and hard-headed, because they are, and powerful as their parents. Every day, all day, I wear a necklace that has my children's name on it, Alexander and Maxwell. And on the back of it has the name that I would call them when I was pregnant with them. So for Alexander, it was A.Run. And for Max, it was Maximum, because he's a big boy, but I love him. And then in the middle, I have a diamond heart, and that's to represent the child that I lost. So although I have 2 children that are running around, that I am following around, it still means that I had 3 children. I'm the woman that doesn't give up. I'm the woman you don't say that you can't do it. I'm not the woman that you can push around and think that I'm going to fall into some traditional role. But I am the woman that's going to fight with every part of my being. I have a lot of passion, and I love the things that I love. And so anything that's important to me, I'm going to give it 150%.